been focused on sharing insights to how decision-grade weather data is optimizing operations. Really, it's about turning weather into a strategic lever. So today, you join us for episode 3, and this naturally builds on our previous 2 episodes. So as a very quick recap, in episode 1, we focused on accuracy in the forecasting, and we looked in particular in terms of how accurate data is really vital for decision making. We shared how accuracy is supporting our utilities customers with the transmission capacity of overhead power lines. And then during episode 2, we built upon those foundations. And we started to explore how probabilistic forecasts are delivering decision-grade data, enabling high-impact decisions such as dynamic line ratings, and also the precise cutout moment for wind turbines. Now, if you haven't seen them already, you can head over to our YouTube channel and find them directly if you just search for DTN. And I'll just skip back. Great, so that brings us to today's session, where we'll be exploring how you can unlock the power of decision-grade data. We'll be sharing examples of how utilities clients are integrating decision-grade data, but crucially, the impact to the bottom line. Now, just before we get started, there are a few housekeeping items. We'd ask that you please use the Q&A feature or the chat feature if you have any questions throughout. We have time at the end where we'll go back and we'll be able to cover those questions. And we are also recording the webinar as well, and we'll be sharing the recording soon after. So if there are any colleagues that can't attend, you'll be able to forward this on and obviously be able to watch it again. So now it's my pleasure to be able to hand you over to Ty, one of our certified meteorologists at DTN. And Ty will be exploring the latest forecast techniques for our decision grade data. So Ty, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Matt. And it's great to see everyone today. As Matt mentioned, my name's Ty Parziebach. I'm a certified consulting meteorologist and our proud product manager for the forecast team at DTN. I'm joining you today from Colorado in the United States. And today, as Matt mentioned, I'm going to be talking about some of our latest forecast techniques. A lot of what I'm going to talk about is a review of our previous episodes, but I did want to share some more information about what we've been doing. So Andrew, there we go. Let's go to start with this slide. So just a quick overview of what we call the DTN forecast system. So our forecast system really starts by first gathering government weather models from around the globe. And we use a machine learning based statistical blend to create our forecasts. And we use, actually up today, I just checked, we have about 18 different input models that we use to create our one forecast. So the global models, of course, are the common ones you may have heard about, the GFS and the ECMWF are the most common. But we also integrate regional forecast models as well as some marine models. We run some in-house numerical models, and then ensemble forecasts are basically forecasts that generate a wide range of forecasts from the same forecast engine, but with different initial conditions. So this allows us to have better accuracy and calculate a number of statistics that I'll demonstrate later out at longer time horizons. So we use the GEFS and the ECMWF ensembles and a number of other models. And then, of course, with the advent of AI, we've got 2 AI models currently within the forecast mix, ECMWF AIFS, and then NVIDIA ForecastNet. We're working very closely with NVIDIA on their AI numerical weather prediction models, and we're leveraging all of these. So basically what we do then is we combine all of these models into a forecast on a grid cell by grid cell, hour by hour, parameter by parameter basis. Although we utilize 18 or so different input models, at the end, we have one consistent unified forecast solution. And when I say consistent, I mean the internal parameters, the output parameters from the model are consistent with one another. So the waves are consistent with the wind speeds and so forth. The one nice thing about, or there's a number of nice things about our forecast system, but a key is it's constantly evolving. The system is constantly evolving and adapting to weather conditions. If there's a change in regime, if one forecast model is doing better for days 1 through 3, but less for days 5 through 7, it can adapt and change and utilize the best performing forecast system and weight it the most in the final forecast. It also adapts to input model performance. So as the government and other industry forecast models become better, our forecast system naturally becomes better automatically. And then it also adapts to data availability. I mean, we utilize a lot of observational data to help bias adjust and adjust the forecasts. That comes in at various times. If it goes out, we're not the forecast system doesn't get compromised as much as others. And as I'll emphasize a little bit more later, our system is constantly being verified and monitored for its performance. Andrea, can you move to the next slide? Thank you. So the forecast system, so these are just some facts and features I wanted to highlight. The first box there, it's model run based. So what that means is it runs every hour, just like a traditional numerical weather prediction model would. It runs out 360 hours, about 15 days, 4 times a day. And then other hours of the day, the 20 times a day, it runs out three days or 72 hours. It's operating on a global scale, which is a powerful feature of the system at a 10th degree. But we do have the ability to do some dynamic geospatial downscaling. So this allows us to quantify and resolve details in complex terrain or at land-water boundaries. So we have the ability to really hone in on forecasts in complicated areas. The middle box there, as I mentioned earlier, it's a coupled atmospheric and oceanic system. Again, the winds, for instance, out of our atmospheric model are driving a lot of the marine parameters. It's robust and resilient to input model outages and changes. I mentioned that also earlier. So, we have 18 different models coming into it. If one of them is not available, the system still operates very robustly. The main outputs from our forecast system are deterministic output, but we also have a number of probabilistic fields, which was covered in some of our previous episodes in this series. Currently, and I just checked, we're up to about 380, almost 390 different output parameters. And when I say parameters, what I mean are we're outputting like temperature, wind speed, precipitation, humidity. We're up to about 180. And this is where we really kind of start speaking to the decision grade data. We're creating parameters that will help you make your decisions faster and more reliable. And then the other thing along the same lines as decision grade data is we create numerous pre-computed indices. So this would include like a thunderstorm risk index, a hot, dry, windy index for wildfire situations, and a tropical storm threat index. So there's a number of indices that we've created that combine a number of different output parameters into something that will make it a little easier for you to make decisions. Also wanted to just mention a few other things about the historical data. We do have hourly historical data that's based off of the forecast system's derivation algorithms for about 31 actually different parameters, different output parameters we have historically, hourly. We are extending this historical data back as beyond 2013 at some point this year as well. From this historical data, we've computed a 10-year climatological data set. When I say time zone adjusted, it's basically that we've adjusted it to be a midnight to midnight day. And so you can get, again, 31 different weather parameters, and we are actually adding marine parameters now as well to these data sets for historical analyses. Next slide, Andrea. Thank you. Oh, back one. Back one more, I think. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that we've got verification and accuracy metrics or tools in place. We, of course, take this very seriously. In a world where forecast accuracy is so important, we take a lot of pride and care in making sure that we have tools in place, and we're partnered with agencies that specialize in forecast verification to ensure that our forecasts are really the best available. So I mentioned here MeteoIQ. This is a company in Europe that does a lot of verification and benchmarking. They largely do a lot of metrics comparing our forecasts to other leading government service providers. So like ECMWF and the ICON models and others. And then Forecast Watch is a US-based company, similar type third-party verification and benchmarking, but they also compare us to other private weather service providers. Can't share all of that information with you, is proprietary, but we have access so we can see kind of how we stack up internally to other private weather companies. And so we're always watching this and making sure that we're staying ahead of the game. And then, of course, internally, we have a number of tools. Amazon Web Services and Datadog are some internal tools that we use for continuous monitoring and alerting of our not only the system performance, but also just its integrity. All right, next slide. So decision grade parameters for utility use cases. So I really tried to pull together some of the key parameters, output parameters that you can use for your use case. As I mentioned, for any location in the US or in the world, there's we're getting close to 390 different atmospheric and marine parameters. The key ones, though, for you all would be temperature at various levels, wind speed and wind gusts, also at various levels. We've got hub height winds for wind turbine applications up to 300 meters. We've got relative humidity, and actually also dew point, I believe, is some of the different parameters available, and precipitation. Now, those four, we also have probabilistic variance. So I'll talk about those in a little bit. Other key parameters, we have the whole range of different solar radiation products, cloud cover, and weather code, which is just a quick descriptor of what the weather is going to be like at a particular hour, and then air pressure. So those are just some of the key ones for utility use cases. So going down to these different, what we call probabilistic variance, the first one is a model blend maximum and minimum. And we have the luxury of having these 18 models plus ensembles, which adds an additional of many different forecasts. We have this very robust statistical data set to calculate a number of statistical outputs for you to use. So this first one's the model blend maximum minimum. And so this really gives you a sense of what the range of the forecasts are from the various models. So it's basically the maximum wind speed that would ever be available in one of the input models, and then the minimum. And then the middle line in this particular plot would be the deterministic value. So that's basically the forecast in this particular case would be a wind speed. So it really gives you a sense of the variability in the forecast, and it starts to give you a sense of how much potential uncertainty that we have. The next is the probability of exceedance. Again, with this great sample size of input models, we have the ability now to calculate what the probability of a certain temperature threshold, for instance, being exceeded. So if you're either making decisions or regulating based off of a 30 Celsius temperature threshold, we have the ability to now calculate what's the probability that will be exceeded. And then we've got just the traditional probability or probabilistic forecasts. So this would be, for instance, like the 90th percentile for temperature. Again, that means that 90% of the sample size of temperatures at a particular hour are going to fall below that threshold. There's a 10% chance, essentially, that you could have temperatures above that probabilistic threshold. So again, there's a lot of probably regulations and decisions that are made based off probabilistic forecasts, and we have that available for a number of parameters. The final thing here I wanted to mention was forecast confidence. This is a fairly new new output parameter from our system for a few parameters. It's temperature, wind speed, and precipitation. Again, this is a categorical value, basically very low confidence to very high confidence, and so you can get a very quick assessment based off of our model variability, the variability from run-to-run forecasts, and that sort of thing. It is adjusted for local climatology, so it's a very nice metric for computing or for understanding really the forecast confidence that we have. And of course, it'll show the degradation of the forecast confidence as you go out into the future, and then it actually usually increases in confidence as you get closer to the real time. So that's all I wanted to say about our forecast system and some of the output. So I'm going to turn it back over now to Matt. We're talking more about the decision grade data.
Matt, you are muted. Matt, we can't see or hear you. I don't know if you are muted or not. Matt, we still can't hear you or see you.
Hi, Andrea. He said he has no controls, so he
Oh,
needs someone to turn
um,
on his mic for him.
okay. Let me see. He has control here. I apologize, everybody. Okay, here. I can only ask to unmute. Let's see.
Hey,
Ask to...
Andrea, can you hear me okay?
Yes, yes.
Fantastic.
Woohoo! Got
Yeah,
you, Matt.
apologies for that. The whole thing just froze. Yeah, sincere apologies. So, yeah, thank you, Ty. Appreciate you taking us through the advanced forecast engine. In this next chapter, we're going to explore what decision grade data really means for utilities. Now, all being well, hopefully I should be able to advance. I might need some help just advancing the slide if that's all right, Andrea. Could you push to the next slide? Brilliant, thank you. So yeah, at DTN, we focus heavily on decision grade data because decision grade data is the information that ultimately powers those really high impact decisions. And for our utilities clients in particular, these decisions typically occur daily. Now, the DTN platform is powered by data that you can't get anywhere else. It incorporates an ecosystem of different data sources, including not only the first party data, but we also ingest third party, and we have our DTN derived data as well, all of which delivers compounding value over time. Now, there are multiple dimensions that make it decision grade data, and we'll explore these in the chapter. But importantly, in today's world, everything that we do is operational AI ready. And that really takes advantage of our advanced partnership with both AWS and also NVIDIA. And then if you wouldn't mind just skipping to the next slide, please, Andrea. So why does this really matter for utilities? Well, we understand the need for trusted decision-grade data right across your operations. And we really lean into the advancing power that AI brings, which fundamentally relies on trusted decision-grade data to really create those super powerful, robust models. So you can see here there are 6 key elements that build up decision-grade intelligence. I won't read them all out individually, but it's vital that the data is fit for your specific use case. The data absolutely has to consider the impact, meaning that you can use it straight away, removing any need for any level of interpretation. I think we all understand the nature of weather has probabilities, so delivering the confidence of the forecast helps make it decision grade. And finally, when we consider all of these different areas, if we look at accuracy, the reliability, having that use case fit, looking at the impact, the probabilistic information, then there's still additional value that we can add. And that's really where Risk Communicator comes in, which is bringing the human in the loop. And their role really is to translate everything for you into a single decision point. Now, all these components build decision grade data that really enable those high impact decisions. And if we just skip to the next slide. So, reliability is absolutely core to the data. The question is really how can you truly achieve this? Well, if we take the first point, we're talking about verifying third-party data, which is really critical for reliability. So, like Ty said, we source third-party data, and then we perform a very important step, which is ultimately the quality check. So, if you take observations, for example, they're absolutely essential to the data. But how do you go about ensuring that that is reliable? Well, for us, it's all about verification. So if, for example, we take a reading from like a cloud cover meter that might show an 8 out of 8 coverage, but actually it might be that there's only a single cloud on top of the meter. So for us, we then combine that with a satellite reading to confirm if it truly is 8 out of 8 coverage. Performing this quality check is an essential step for reliability. What you can't do is just process and then deliver the information, because ultimately that will lead to mistakes. Now, when we consider reliability, it's important to also look at other areas such as uptime, redundancy, so you ensure that you can rely on the decision grade data. You should also consider things like backups or even caching the latest forecasts, so you've always got a version available. You should definitely take a look at the delivery method. So you might integrate the information through an API, but then you might also have a backup that comes through email. And of course, support and SLAs are both important elements when you're actually delivering reliability within the system. But you also want a layer of resilience beyond just the system itself. So knowing that you can pick up the phone, call the company, and be able to access a risk communicator 24/7, 365. That's how you ensure ultimate reliability for decision grade data. So accuracy is, a super important component for decision grade data. One of the key considerations within accuracy is precision versus resolution. So you might have a very high resolution forecast, but if, for example, it isn't aligned to your timestamp, then it fails. So imagine you need a 2 p.m. update, but you may only receive 6 hourly timestamps. Then this is going to fail in precision and therefore ultimately impact your decisions. Now, with temporal resolution, we know that 15 minutes provides a better fit. It's far more accurate than hourly because it removes the need to interpolate, which again drives accuracy. Similarly, with observations, which we just covered, fundamental to the data, we can feed these in 5-minute values rather than leaving to hourly chunks. And most of the numerical models run at 4 times a day. But to really ensure higher accuracy, we run ours every hour. Now, these are all elements that really drive precision because you need to know what's happening in the moment that you're taking the decision. And it's that precision and accuracy that really feeds into decision grade data. Now, we do also understand that the very best models can be off sometimes, and that's where confidence is really important. You need to know upfront if there's any tricky weather that'll start to impact any of your locations. So you need additional information on confidence levels. And it's that extra information that allows you to make, really the right decision. And that's where probabilistic forecasting really does support. And obviously, to maintain accuracy, you must ensure that the data is continually verified, providing you with reliable, precise, accurate information that ultimately feeds into decision grade data. And if we skip to the next slide. Yeah, so we briefly touched on the importance of use case fit, and we see here that might involve selecting the right parameter for your requirements. So if for example we take the effective temperature for gas consumption. Now here we're effectively blending parameters including temperature, wind speed, and radiation, which are all combined to predict the gas demand. So we have the GAT, which is the gas allocation temperature, and that's used in Germany. And in the UK, we have the CWV, which is the composite weather variable. So we basically fit the parameters to a specific use case. Now, another example might be for wind turbines. So understanding the hub height winds. Now here you can imagine that the use case fit is absolutely vital. If we compare the standard 10-meter winds against 150, 200, 250 meter high, depending on where the hub height wind is, then this really unlocks the decision on how much wind power will be generated, which again is, highly applicable. Now, the PCI or the probabilistic parameters, typically with ensembles, they have a spread after day 3. Now, to make this decision grade, we make our probabilistic forecasts work from hour 1. And that means that we can support intraday and day ahead, and they both perform exceptionally well. And if you haven't already, I would recommend checking out episode 2 for more details on DTN's probabilistic forecasts. Now, we previously touched on the 15-minute temporal resolution. We know that the market works in a 15-minute resolution, so we ensure that we match that. And finally, it's really important to consider the technical integration as well. It's really important for your particular use case. Now, in the technical integration, it's about ensuring flexibility. Some people might need updates through the email, maybe, teams that are out in the field. Some might need a file. There might be others that need gridded information provided on a map, if we think of something like an operations center, for example. All of these different integration approaches are available. So the way that we deliver, but also how we deliver the information makes the data easier to integrate, fits your use case, and then ultimately unlocks that decision grade data. Next, we really have to consider the impact. So how will this weather, how will this weather ultimately impact me? Now we can already see what the temperature or what the wind speed is, but really understanding what it means for me and my network or my operations is really important. And actually, we're moving just beyond the use case fit. Now, this can be AI based, and we can develop really powerful impact modeling. So, as an example, you may see that there's going to be a storm coming in, but really now we're looking to translate the impact of a decision. And to do that, we've developed storm impact analytics. And this translates how a storm will impact on, the number of customers that are out, or alternatively, the number of faults across a network. And this impact modeling is transferred to many of the different use cases as well. So we also use and integrate first-party data from our customers, and that's used to help us to build advanced recommendations. And here we're using a blend of AI, but also our expert risk communicator teams as well. And they're continually reviewed, they're verified, and that means that they can then self-optimize, which helps to feed into the accuracy and ultimately start to drive that decision intelligence. So that means that you no longer need to worry about following or tracking particular weather events. You then have a system in place that has a robust decision grade data that ultimately provides the right action at the right time. If we just skip to the next slide. So we touched on this earlier. We all know that weather data, by definition, has a probabilistic nature. So how does this support decision grade data? Well, actually, it's great to be able to quantify the level of uncertainty. You could have, a very high performing model. 99% of the time, it might be right, but you also have a certainty quantification. We all know that the best model can be off some days, and that's the nature of weather information. But with the uncertainty qualification, you can start to identify when it might be off. And what that does is it unlocks your ability to actually do something. So, for example, you receive the same numbers if it's going to be 20 degrees, but you could also see that it might be 17 or 18. And with this, it might mean that you make a slightly different decision. So it means that you're basically way more able to effectively manage risk, and that could be a risk that saves cost, but it could also save lives in a really tricky situation. Now, most longer term decisions, those decisions that are made maybe 3 days ahead, will definitely benefit from uncertainty qualification. But as we covered, DTN's probabilistic forecast also benefits from 1 hour ahead, supporting intraday and day ahead, giving that perfect use case fit. So to summarize, you're effectively unlocking the full picture, which powers that effective decisioning. As an example for gas, we know at 15 degrees Celsius, that means gas consumption. But if you know that that number has some uncertainty, then you may use it to optimize your ultimate decision. And it's this quality of information that makes it decision grade. And finally, if we think about the whole process and using all of the available data, then there's added value from bringing the human in the loop. We have a team that deeply understands how to interpret the information and then ultimately prepare it for you. And this is a service that can be used to really support those, truly high impact decisions. So if we imagine, there's a weather event that's declared by our risk communicator, they would then issue a bespoke report, which we refer to as the Energy Event Index. And really that supports our customers in taking decisions. This is really about them being prepared for an event and actually not being reactive. So here we're taking our weather knowledge and we're continually monitoring the weather across our global teams, but we also understand what our customers are doing with it. So we're choosing, the right triggers from the weather that really generate impact, and we understand how the weather is then going to impact on their operations, on their network, etc. So, for example, if the risk communicator grades a particular weather event as red, then this might mean that the client goes to stage 5 of their processes and prepares for that. So that might mean looking at deploying teams ready for the impact, or it could mean, issuing supplies and resources, for example. Now, a risk communicator is adopted, across a range of different clients, and Brad will come on to share more about that later on in the session. But at this time of year, they're working closely, particularly on seasonal change and preparing for the cold weather, the cold snap, which obviously has a huge impact on areas like gas consumption. So we're helping customers to effectively prepare for that precise moment when we're going to see spikes in consumptions. And if we just skip to the next slide. So yeah, I mean, they're the key components for decision grade data, specifically for utilities. As you can see, it's way more than just accuracy. We have to ensure that we have the right use case fit. So we talked about, 10-meter wind is going to be useless for a turbine. We need to ensure that we've got 150-meter hub height winds. And decision grade data, truly does deliver value. If we take gas consumption, for example, and the effective temperature, I don't need to do all those calculations myself. I just get the information that I need. I trust the numbers. I've got the probability and the confidence levels around it, which means I can now act decisively. So decision grade data is not about knowing the weather. It's about understanding the impact of the weather. So whether that's, like we just said, gas consumption, renewables generation, preparing for storm events, you really need decision grade intelligence to support these high impact decisions. So next up, I'm delighted to introduce Nick and Brad, who are going to share the bottom line impact of decision grade data.
Okay, appreciate it, Matt. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nick Wilson. I'm DTN's Director of Product Management for Weather and Climate Intelligence. I'm based in the United States. I have a meteorology and business background. I've got the unique perspective, though. Earlier in my career, I spent 3 years living and working abroad in Hamburg, Germany, where I had the opportunity to work with many utilities and renewable energy providers. So I want to take a few minutes to highlight some of my observations about key differences between the challenges that are faced by the European utility and renewable energy market relative to North America. First and foremost, there's higher renewable energy penetration. You have separated TSO and DSO operations, cross-border complexity. There's 30 gigawatts of offshore wind now in Europe. And here's the key difference is there's not much of a regulatory penalty structure environment driving behavior. European utilities don't invest in weather intelligence because regulators force them to. They invest because it's the difference between profitable operations and catastrophic losses. So let's jump into the next slide where I'm going to walk through 6 weather-dependent use cases that matter most. First is wind production forecasting and grid balancing. So, this is a challenge that keeps every European TSO operator up at night, which is grid balancing with, anywhere from 25 to 40% renewable penetration. This isn't theory, this is operational reality. When wind speed forecasts are off just by 10%, you see a 3x or 30% output gap. And that gap, it costs 20 to 50 million euros in emergency reserve activation per event. And that's what makes this problem, unique to Europe. Your TSOs aren't just managing local grids. They're coordinating across, NSOE, managing cross-border flows and trading in day-ahead markets where forecast accuracy is going to determine your profitability. Standard meteorological models can't deliver this. They're built on airport observation, land-based parameters that aren't well correlated and aligned to your utility assets. But look where your wind is. 120, 200 meters above sea level in the North Sea. That requires marine-oriented atmospheric boundary layer modeling that doesn't exist in conventional weather services. During the January 2024 wind drought, German TSOs, for example, activated 150 million euros in emergency gas generation, largely due to forecast uncertainty. And utilities that have probabilistic offshore wind forecasts, they make better dispatch decisions. They avoid emergency reserves. And they don't panic buy expensive backup power. Grid balancing isn't a weather problem. It's an infrastructure capability problem. But renewable energy forecasting means nothing if a storm takes down your grid in the first place. So if we go to the next slide. If I mention Storm Sierra, Storm Eunice, Storm Kirill, these are European windstorms that have provided substantial impact that, they don't respect national borders as an Atlantic low pressure system tracks across the UK, France, Germany, Poland, all in 48 hours. A utility typically has a 72-hour decision window. That's it. This is the operational reality. When a major windstorm threatens multiple countries, the DSO that makes activation decisions at 72 hours ahead is going to get the crews. There's really fierce competition when multiple countries are expected to be impacted. The one that waits, they're bringing in contractors from Eastern Europe 5 days later when their customers are sitting in the dark. Let's say 5 days or 120 hours in advance, you're typically monitoring ECMW ensemble models. At 72 hours, though, it's decision time. Do we activate mutual aid agreements with neighboring utilities? Do we pre-position equipment? This is the most expensive decision many operation managers make all year. Get it wrong, and you've wasted upwards of $3 million in 3 million euros on crews that you didn't need. Wait too long, and you're looking at 20 to 50 million euros in extended outages and emergency repairs. Storm Eunice, back in February 2022, utilities that activated early restored power in 48 hours. Those that waited had extended outages up to 7 days in the future. Notice what I didn't mention, though, which is regulatory penalties. Those don't exist in most European markets like they do in North America. So, this is really about operational excellence and cost control. The utilities that do it better with intelligence, 72 hours out, even, having visibility out to 15 days in the future. Those are the teams that are going to get better, faster repairs in order to achieve customer satisfaction. But windstorms don't just damage overhead lines. Windstorms, they're really focused on damaging overhead lines. Whereas with the peril of flooding, that destroys your most critical assets. If you go to the next slide. Let me be really direct here. A single flooded transmission substation is a 50 million euro replacement cost. And that really creates grid instability across multiple areas. If you look at Europe's geography, you've got, the Rhine, the Danube, the Thames, the Seine, major river systems that your transmission corridors follow and cross. And, increasingly you're seeing, for example, like what we saw in July of 2021, a rapid onset of flooding that gives you, 24 to 72 hours to protect assets or lose them. And this is really the challenge of coordination across TSOs and DSOs. There's separate entities in Europe, unlike North Americans' typical, vertical integration. Flood risk doesn't really care about organizational boundaries. A flooded TSO transmission substation takes out DSO distribution downstream, DSO underground vaults, in Paris, London, Amsterdam. Flash flooding can destroy multiple sites simultaneously. So you need shared intelligence across these operations. 72 hours in advance, you need to activate flood protocols, stage temporary barriers, pre-position mobile substations. At 48 hours, you deploy pumping equipment, coordinate protection between TSOs and DSOs. And 24 hours in advance, final barrier deployment, preemptive de-energization decisions, and activate backup assets. If we look back in that event from 2021, 15 substations were inundated in Germany and Belgium, 200 million euros in damage, and some assets took up to 6 months to reconstruct. And that's, here's why this matters. Utilities that have an upwards of 72-hour advanced flood intelligence can deploy temporary barriers and avoid 80% of their potential losses. That's the difference between 50 million and 10 million euros in prevention cost. Actionable intelligence with enough lead time to actually do something about it. So while onshore grids face, the flooding risks just described, offshore assets face their own unique challenges. If we go to the next slide. When we talk about offshore wind maintenance and lightning safety, uh, you know, emphasized at the beginning, there's now 30 gigawatts of installed offshore wind capacity. These turbines are massive. They've got blade tips all the way up to near 300 meters now. And most importantly, 50 kilometers offshore. Europe is leading the world in offshore wind, but that leadership creates operational complexity. So let's talk about the financial reality of offshore maintenance. You need simultaneous favorable conditions. Wind speeds below 10 meters per second, wave heights below 1.5 meters, visibility above 1 kilometer for 3 to 7 consecutive days. And you're paying 200, 300,000 euros per day for crane vessels sitting there just waiting for the optimal weather window. Forecast error isn't theoretical. If you have challenges in an accurate forecast to make these critical decisions, that's six figures in euro costs per day. And then there's the human element. Workers at nacelle or hub height level in a marine environment. Lightning strikes provide uh, a great threat. There's no immediate shelter. Maritime rescue response times are 30 to 60 minutes. You need to have real-time lightning proximity alerts built for the offshore environment, not adapted from land-based systems. And when lightning does strike, and it will, offshore wind turbines see a higher strike frequency. So you need historical strike data to correlate with blade damage because a single blade replacement can be in upwards of 500,000 euros plus mobilization costs. Standard meteorological models are designed for land applications. They can't provide the marine atmospheric boundary layer physics your offshore operations require. You need hub height wind forecasts at those heights that you're operating at, upwards of 200 meters. You need wave modeling. You need offshore specific lightning detection. Europe has 95% of the offshore wind capacity, so you're not adapting to other solutions. You're really pioneering a capability that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. If we go to the next slide here, we've talked about local assets like turbines, substations, distribution grids, but there's one more layer that's uniquely critical to Europe, and that's transmission corridors. This is Europeans' grid backbone, and when one of these corridors fail, electricity markets fracture. So let me give you an example. Back in January 2018, Storm Frederic. Transmission outages separated German and French bidding zones. The result, 180 euros per megawatt hour price differential. $75 million euros in market inefficiency from a single storm. This is the TSO specific challenge that doesn't exist for distribution operators. You're not managing small polygon territories. You're managing linear corridors that span hundreds of kilometers and cross multiple countries. TSOs need line specific intelligence. East-west corridor wind loading, north-south corridor ice risk, offshore high voltage DC wind exposure. It's not just point location, whether it's span by span risk profiles. And you're making coordinated decisions with neighboring TSOs. At 48 to 72 hours, you need to assess contingency scenarios, request preventative generation dispatch, and at 24 hours, reduce line loading and vulnerable circuits. So ultimately, what's at stake here is if a transmission line fails, it's not just a reliability issue, it's a market stability issue that affects wholesale prices, cross-border commitments, and grid security across an entire region. If we go to the next slide, just want to cover one more use case quickly, which is dynamic line rating. Your transmission lines have static thermal ratings based on worst case summer conditions, but actual conditions vary dramatically. With real-time weather in the environment of the conductors at height, ambient temperature, wind speed, solar radiation, you can calculate actual thermal capacity in real time. And the financial impact there, every time that you avoid generation redispatch because you can safely use 15 to 20% more line capacity, you're saving 5 to 20 million euros. Multiply that across multiple corridors, multiple seasons, and you're looking at hundreds of millions in avoided redispatch costs over the life of your transmission assets. You've built the infrastructure. The question is, are you using all of it? So let's bring this all together in the final slide here, Andrea. 6 use cases. They're ultimately all interconnected. Grid balancing depends on transmission corridor availability. Offshore wind feeds directly into balancing operations. TSO and DSO coordination is required for both storm response, flood protection, and load optimization. And all of it requires European-specific intelligence, not American solutions adapted for different markets. This is the fundamental difference. European utilities, they're investing because accurate, actionable weather intelligence is the difference between profitable operations and catastrophic loss. We talked about 50 million euro substations, 200 million euro storm responses, 150 million euro emergency reserve activations. European utilities need European solutions. So with that, I'd love to hand it off to my colleague Brad to provide additional perspective about communicating these risks across your team.
All right. Thank you very much, Nick. I appreciate it. So I am going to talk about our risk communicator team, which is our amazing team of 130 meteorologists at DTN spread across the globe, and supporting all of our global customers. So, in particular, the risk communicator team for utilities themselves, and this team can help you, and how they use DTN's decision grade data and apply that to critical insights for your operations, looking at the weather conditions. So let me walk through the framework here. This is really about one key thing, is making sure that people and decision makers within your organization get the right information at the right time ahead of and during severe weather events. We start with this risk assessment here on the left, and that is before a storm hits. Think of that as like building a playbook for you. We create a comprehensive weather risk summary, which is tailored towards your operations. We understand your triggers, your action plans, your thresholds. We can even assist you in building those out, for example, so that really when it comes down to it, when a storm hits, everyone knows exactly when to act, who to call, what information needs to be conveyed, and we build out that communication structure as well. So testing this out is important. We build this out through workshops, mock drills. We deeply embed a risk communicator meteorologist within your organization, because practice, prevents panic and builds efficiency, for example. And you really gain trust and knowledge of each other by integrating into operations. During the pre-storm and storm activation phase, this is during an event when timing is critical. It's everything, right? We shift into like the active mode. That's where you're receiving proactive monitoring, early warnings of hazardous weather, for example. You pick up the phone, you call us, we pick up the phone and proactive and give you a call and it helps build consistent, clear messaging across your entire operation then. So real-time briefings through video and conference calls can be provided, and critically impact guidance specific to your operations. It's not just generic weather data. Post-storm evaluations. After the storm, we work with you to evaluate and learn things for the next storm. So receiving post-storm reports with verified data, what occurred, what was conveyed, the forecast data and the live data, observations, radar, satellite, for example. All that documentation really holds up with regulators and insurers. These reports are stakeholder ready, to say, for your board, your insurers, your regulatory bodies. We use these insights internally too at DTN to continuously improve your preparedness and our preparedness for next time. So that's it. That's our full life cycle. It's assess, activate, and evaluate, and transform weather data into actual actionable weather intelligence that protects your operations and your people. Turn off the laser pointer. There we go. Expand the slide here. There we go. All right, so let's talk about a little bit about how we can help minimize imbalance penalties. So many European utilities will face these imbalance penalties when they, we might fail to accurately match electric supply commitments with actual demand. And this is a case, for example, on this graph when southern weather changes and can cause unexpected demand spikes, like in the summer, heat waves and your cooling usage, and then cold snaps in the winter here for heating spikes in heating demand. And that's where you can get caught off guard, and you might need to buy very expensive power on short notice, or perhaps face penalties. So looking ahead with our risk communicator team and our DTN global data with our forecast internal with our forecast system that Ty mentioned, we give you that early warning and give you the confidence 12 plus days in the future, right? To adjust your generation schedules. You can buy and sell power in advance, cheaper than spot markets, for example, and then arrange backup capacity before prices spike. Forecasting the uncertainty, the spread in the models is extremely important. And this is the statistical analysis and data within our forecast system that Ty was mentioning, is that you can look at the spread in the model guidance, and for example, understand an upper bound scenario. What is like the best case scenario that might drive less heating demand? Or what's the lower bound scenario down here in the green line that is going to generate a much greater demand? And then compare that to the actual forecast and the forecast spread, which also builds confidence in what is going to occur in regards to that temperature and the errors then. So, for example, this chart helps identify critical temperature spikes and drops, not just the statistical spread, so you can plan ahead, pre-position resources, and prepare for those increases in demand well before these types of events occur. So instead of reacting to demand spikes after they happen, which is expensive, utilities can proactively adjust supply commitments days in advance, which is much cheaper, and keep supply demand balanced, avoiding those penalties. So in short, better weather intelligence equals better demand forecasting equals fewer costly mismatches, which equals essentially lower penalties. All right, let's talk about some of our deep meteorological expertise. What are our forecasters looking at? This is just an example of some of the model data that our forecasters might be looking at on top of DTN's weather data. We're looking at the individual model runs of the ECMWF. This happens to be mean sea level pressure, precipitation, and wind speeds around a very strong mid-latitude cyclone over the North Sea, and then the wind speeds associated with that storm. So during briefings, our meteorologists can look at the data, understand your risks in certain areas, and break it down for you. You get to see what we're seeing, and we can describe essentially the forecast conditions and the impacts. All right, so how many times have you been caught off by weather? Just think about that. A sudden storm takes down lines, an under forecast cold snap spikes heating demand, or you get a series of major storms that interrupts your supply chains and causes major disruptions. So as weather becomes more volatile in certain areas of the world and your grid expands, it becomes more complex. It's a combination for instability. And unless you have really the right intelligence, it can be a recipe for instability. And that's where turning weather from your biggest vulnerability into a competitive advantage is extremely important. So DTN really has kind of this holistic solution. We have a platform that can provide alerting and data and intelligence. On top of that, with APIs and data feeds and GIS solutions. And then you add in the human in the loop element, the risk communication. kind of brings that holistic piece together, right? That means like your grid operators are seeing the same information and getting the same information as your field crews. Alerts trigger automatically based on your custom thresholds. Everyone responds to the same playbook, for example. There's no information silos, no delayed responses. It's just coordinated action when it matters most. And then the meteorologists at your side is extremely important. They aren't just weather experts, they're grid impact experts as well. They understand the industry. They understand you don't care just about the cold temperatures. You care about the impact those cold temperatures, the duration, the severity, the suddenness, for example, will have on the grid, on the heating demand, and more importantly, the decisions you're making for your entire operation. Proactive consulting and alerting. This is critical. Think about the differences between these couple scenarios, like a storm hits, lines go down, customers lose power, crews scramble, restoration takes days, right? Compare that to being proactive. 3 days before a storm, you receive a detailed briefing from a meteorologist. This gives you confidence to pre-position crews in vulnerable areas, de-energize at-risk lines, communicate with industrial customers, activate emergency protocols. The storm hits, you're ready, outages are minimal, restoration is rapid. And that's really the power of getting ahead of the risk. You're not reacting to failures, you're preventing them. And then different weather parameters that we're actually monitoring, because grid stability depends on multiple weather factors combined. Temperature combined with wind speeds combined with precipitation, for example. Every one of these parameters can destabilize your grid, especially in combination, right? And that's where DTN monitors all of them, which provides uncertainty ranges and alerts you to those grid-specific impacts. So the bottom line, grid stability isn't hoping the weather cooperates. Hope is not a strategy, as my manager always tells me. It's about having the intelligence, really, to stay ahead of it there. And so, let's talk a little bit about managing restoration efforts. Expert weather risk communicators transform restoration management by providing utilities with critical intelligence before, during, and after storm events. We identify grid disruptions, like I mentioned, well in advance when storms are way out of the horizon. That's where you can develop strong mitigation and preparedness plans to pre-position crews, equipment, and resources, as Nick was also mentioning earlier. So perhaps most importantly is, how bad is it really? Like, we see a big storm and might be hyped in the news. You're hearing it from multiple sources. How bad is it? Like, how severe is it going to impact me? Working with a meteorologist to dissect that data really and understand the risk levels and the impacts really helps you allocate the right level of resources and get ahead of it. Prevents, under preparation, but also over mobilization that might waste your budget, for example, and cost a lot of money. So the result is faster restoration, reduced crew downtime, lower overtime costs, and improved customer satisfaction. And the last thing I'm going to touch on, and to wrap up the webinar here, is DTN seasonal forecasts. We have a team of expert long-range weather risk communicators that are breaking down the seasonal risks for areas of the world. This happens to be our latest Europe winter outlook. And not going to go through all the details, but this is kind of those insights that you're going to receive from our expert team. They're looking not only like next week, they're looking out 3 months ahead, 6 months ahead, even out to 2 years ahead. Looking at all the teleconnections that are occurring across the globe and understanding how that, like a positive North Atlantic oscillation, what's that going to mean? Is that going to create a warmer scenario, 20% chance of that occurring? Or is that going to most likely create a colder scenario, in this case, a 15% chance compared to the current forecast for the winter across the Europe region? So it's these kind of critical insights to kind of understand the demands and the real risk then. Yeah, and then with that, also showcasing some of the breaking down the various regions of the world, of Europe, and then understanding what the actual impacts are, down to region level and down to your grid operation level as well is extremely important. All right, and with that, I'll turn it back over to Matt, I believe, and we'll go through some Q&A. Thank you.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Brad. And also, to tie in Nick for the expert insights to the power of decision grade data. Yeah, I guess just to wrap the episode up, you've obviously heard how DTN's proprietary forecast system is continually updated and how we ensure accuracy through external verification. We've looked at how the parameters that we built are specifically designed for the utility space. In particular, if I think about things like the hub height winds, for example. We then took a deeper dive into decision grade data and the multiple dimensions that provide compounded value for our clients. And ultimately, removing the complexity in tracking the weather and really creating highly effective decision points for your operations and also for your assets. Nick went on to highlight how the value that decision grade data brings to the bottom line. For example, we saw how a 10% error in wind forecast accuracy can lead to up to 50 million euro in costs. And with Brad, we learned how the value of decision grade data is compounded further with our risk communicator service, helping teams to effectively prepare for storms, minimize imbalance penalties, and really unlock those moments to purchase capacity at lower prices. Now, all these elements set a new level of intelligence within the market and really unlock true decision grade data. So I guess if you're not currently unlocking the power of decision grade data and you want to be able to turn weather from an uncontrollable variable and actually pivot towards using it as a strategic lever, then please do get in touch. With any of us that are on the panel, we're all on LinkedIn, or alternatively, you can contact us directly through the website at dtn.com. So I think all that's left to say is thank you again for your time and have a great rest of the day.